The alarm at Tactical Outpost 87 screamed at 0500 hours, just like it had every morning for the past 18 months. Eliza Shaw rolled out of her narrow bunk, her calloused hands already reaching for her regulation boots before her eyes fully opened. At 25, she moved with the mechanical precision of someone who'd learned that drawing attention meant inviting trouble. The Cadron Plateau was unforgiving, a windswept hellscape of rock and ice where temperatures dropped below freezing even in summer. The outpost itself looked like something cobbled together from spare parts, prefab buildings connected by covered walkways, reinforced bunkers that shook when the mountain winds hit just right, and radio towers that constantly needed repair from the weather and occasional enemy mortar fire. Eliza's reflection in the cracked mirror showed the same face she'd worn for months. Brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun, so tight it gave her headaches. 5'4" frame that looked smaller in the oversized fatigues, and eyes that had learned not to expect much from anyone. Her hands bore the evidence of her daily routine: cuts from ammunition belts, chemical burns from cleaning solvents, calluses from handling equipment that the real soldiers were too important to maintain themselves. Shaw. The voice cut through the morning air like a knife. Staff Sergeant Martinez stood in the doorway of the supply bunker, his massive frame blocking most of the light. His mustache, which he claimed hadn't been trimmed since Clinton was in office, twitched with barely concealed disgust. Those M4 South better be spotless when I inspect them at 0800. And I mean spotless, not your usual half-hearted woman's work. She didn't respond. 18 months of experience had taught her that any reaction would only make things worse. Instead, she nodded once and returned to her workbench, where 17 assault rifles waited for the obsessive cleaning that had become her signature. Each weapon would be disassembled completely, every component scrubbed until it gleamed, then reassembled with the kind of precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep. You know what your problem is, Shaw? Martinez wasn't finished. He never was. You think you belong here with real soldiers. But cleaning guns ain't the same as using them. Good thing, too. We'd all be dead if we depended on you pulling a trigger when it mattered. The other soldiers in earshot chuckled, right on cue. It was the same performance every day, with slight variations in the script. Sometimes it was about her size, sometimes about her gender, always about her failure at Blackwater Sniper Academy, the one black mark on her record that followed her everywhere like a shadow. What they didn't know, what nobody at the outpost knew, was that Eliza Shaw had been trained by Master Sergeant Carter, the man who held the record for the longest confirmed kill in military history. The instructor so selective that he'd only accepted 3 students in his entire 30-year career. For 2 years, she'd been his final pupil, learning techniques that most snipers couldn't even pronounce, let alone execute. But that was before the academy, before Sergeant Reynolds had accidentally slammed his clipboard on her shooting table, just as she squeezed the trigger during her final qualification. Before the official report that made her hand tremors sound like a character flaw instead of a deliberate sabotage. Before her dreams of becoming a sniper died in a spray of missed shots and bureaucratic indifference. Now she was furniture. Useful, invisible furniture that kept the weapons clean so the real shooters could use them. As Martinez walked away, already shouting at some other unlucky soul, Eliza continued her work. Her movements were methodical, almost meditative. Strip the bolt carrier group, clean the chamber, inspect the barrel for fouling. Each action performed with a precision that would have impressed her old instructor if anyone cared to notice. The morning sun was climbing over the eastern peaks when she finished the last rifle. 17 weapons, each one cleaned to specifications that exceeded military standards. She'd been at it for 3 hours, her back aching from hunching over the workbench, her fingers raw from the cleaning chemicals. But every rifle was perfect, not because anyone would appreciate it, but because lives depended on weapons that functioned flawlessly when everything else went to hell. "Hey, Shaw." The voice was different this time, younger, less hostile. Corporal Jason Webb, barely 22 and still green enough to believe that competence mattered more than politics. He was one of the few who didn't actively participate in the daily mockery, though he never spoke up against it either. "Command wants to see you." Eliza's stomach dropped. Being summoned to the command bunker usually meant one of two things: extra duty or disciplinary action. Given that she hadn't done anything wrong, hadn't done anything at all except clean weapons and stay invisible, it was probably the former. The command bunker was carved directly into the mountainside, its concrete walls thick enough to withstand direct artillery hits. Maps covered every surface, showing the contested valley below, where enemy forces had been probing their defenses for weeks. Radio equipment chattered constantly with traffic from other outposts, creating a background noise that never stopped. Captain Rodriguez looked up from a stack of reports when she entered. At 45, he was old enough to have seen real combat, young enough to still believe the military was a meritocracy. His weathered face bore the kind of scars that came from leading from the front, and his eyes held the weary patience of someone who'd learned that good soldiers came in all shapes and sizes. "Shaw, we've got a situation developing." He gestured to the tactical display where red markers showed enemy positions in the valley. "Intelligence indicates increased activity along the western approaches. We need all hands on deck for enhanced observation duties." She nodded, waiting for the assignment. Probably another 12-hour shift in one of the observation posts, watching empty terrain through binoculars while pretending she couldn't shoot better than half the men who were assigned. Actual weapons. "You'll be on observation post 9 starting tomorrow," Rodriguez continued. "It's got the best sight lines across the valley, nearly 2,000 yards of clear visibility on a good day." He paused, studying her face. "I know you've got the eye for detail, Shaw. We need someone who won't miss anything important." It wasn't exactly a compliment, but it wasn't an insult either. In the bizarre ecosystem of military hierarchy, being assigned to the most important observation post meant someone, somewhere, thought she was competent. It was the closest thing to recognition she'd received in 18 months. As she walked back to the supply bunker, Eliza allowed herself a moment of something that might have been hope. Observation Post 9 was equipped with advanced thermal imaging equipment and long-range optics. She'd finally have access to the kind of precision instruments she'd trained with under Master Sergeant Carter. Maybe, just maybe, she'd get a chance to prove that she was more than just a glorified janitor with a uniform. She didn't know that in less than 48 hours, General Logan's convoy would be trapped in an ambush 900 yards away, with no qualified snipers available to help. She didn't know that her forgotten skills would be the only thing standing between a decorated general and a sniper's bullet. She didn't know that everything was about to change. But as she settled back into her routine of cleaning weapons and being invisible, something had shifted. For the first time in months, Eliza Shaw felt like she might actually belong somewhere, even if that somewhere was a lonely observation post on a frozen mountain, watching an empty valley for enemies that might never come. Tomorrow would prove her wrong about the enemies. But tonight, for just a few hours, she allowed herself to hope. The mess hall at 1800 hours was exactly what you'd expect from a military outpost, built on a shoestring budget. Fluorescent lights that flickered intermittently, plastic tables scarred by years of abuse, and the persistent aroma of reheated Narese that had seen better days. Eliza sat alone at the corner table she'd claimed as her own, mechanically working through a beef stew that tasted like cardboard and regret. "Did you hear about Shaw's new assignment?" The voice carried clearly across the nearly empty hall. Corporal Danny Peterson, a 24-year-old from Alabama whose main qualification seemed to be an endless supply of cruel jokes. They're putting her on OP9. Guess Command finally found the perfect job for someone who can't shoot, watching other people do the real work. The laughter that followed was predictable, like a bad sitcom laugh track. Eliza kept her eyes on her tray, counting the pieces of what might have been carrots floating in the brown liquid that passed for gravy. She'd learned long ago that reacting only fed the beast. "I heard she almost made it through sniper school," said Private Tommy Rodriguez, Danny's ever-present sidekick. Almost being the key word. Apparently, her hands shake so bad she couldn't hit the broad side of a barn if she was standing inside it. More laughter. Eliza's grip tightened imperceptibly on her plastic spoon, but her expression never changed. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that her failure at Blackwater had been orchestrated. Sergeant Reynolds had made sure she didn't make the cut, not because she lacked skill, but because she had too much of it. "Shaky Shaw," Peterson continued, clearly enjoying his audience. That's what they called her at the academy. Heard she cried when they washed her out. That was the part that stung the most, not because it was cruel, but because it was completely fabricated. She hadn't cried. She'd stood at attention while Reynolds delivered his verdict, accepted it with military bearing, and walked out with her head high. But the truth had never been as entertaining as the fiction. "Leave it alone, Peterson." The voice came from the serving line, where Specialist Marcus Thompson was loading his tray with the same questionable stew. At 27, Thompson was older than most of the enlisted men, a former college student who joined the Army after 9/11s and never quite fit in with the traditional military culture. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the soft-spoken manner of someone who preferred books to bullying. "What's that, college boy?" Peterson's tone turned nasty. Thompson's education made him another favorite target, though not as popular as Eliza. "You defending your girlfriend?" "I'm suggesting you find better ways to spend your time than harassing fellow soldiers," Thompson replied calmly, carrying his tray toward Eliza's table. "We're all on the same team here." "Yeah, well, some team members are more useful than others." Peterson's voice followed him across the room. "At least you can handle a weapon without shaking like a leaf." "Shaw can't even." "Can't even what?" The new voice cut through the mess hall like a blade. Staff Sergeant Williams stood in the doorway, his 23 years of service evident in every line of his weathered face. At 52, he was the oldest soldier on the base, a veteran of conflicts most of the younger troops couldn't even pronounce. His presence commanded immediate respect, not because of his rank, but because everyone knew he'd earned every stripe the hard way. Peterson's cocky grin evaporated. "Nothing, Sergeant. Just talking. Talking." Williams' expression suggested he knew exactly what kind of talking had been going on. "Peterson, Rodriguez, you're both on extra duty tomorrow. Kitchen patrol at 0400. But Sergeant, 0400. Sharp." Williams' tone brooked no argument. "And Peterson? Next time I hear you running your mouth about a fellow soldier's service record, you'll be scrubbing latrines until your hands are as raw as your mouth is loud." The mess hall fell silent, except for the eternal hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of wind howling through the mountain passes. Peterson and Rodriguez exchanged glances, but knew better than to push their luck with Williams. They finished their meals in sullen silence and left without another word. Thompson settled into the chair across from Eliza, his presence welcome but unexpected. "Mind if I sit?" She shrugged, not trusting her voice. Kindness was so rare in this place that she'd almost forgotten how to respond to it. "I was at Benning when Master Sergeant Carter was still teaching," Thompson said, quietly, stirring his stew without eating it. "Heard he only took on special students." The kind who could do things with a rifle that most people wouldn't believe. Eliza's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. Nobody was supposed to know about Carter. She'd kept that part of her background carefully hidden, knowing it would only make the mockery worse if people knew she'd trained with a legend and still failed at the academy. I also heard, Thompson continued, his voice so low it barely carried across the small table, that sometimes the best soldiers don't make it through schools for reasons that have nothing to do with their abilities. Their eyes met for the first time, and Eliza saw something there she hadn't expected. Understanding. Not pity, not curiosity, but the recognition of someone who'd seen enough military politics to know that talent and advancement didn't always go hand in hand. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "Because I've been watching how you maintain those weapons. I've seen the way you handle equipment, and I've noticed that every rifle you clean functions flawlessly in the field." He paused. "That's not the work of someone who doesn't understand firearms." Before Eliza could respond, the mess hall door slammed open with enough force to rattle the windows. Staff Sergeant Martinez stormed in, his face red with exertion and something that looked suspiciously like panic. "Where's Captain Rodriguez?" he demanded, scanning the nearly empty room. "Command bunker," Williams replied, instantly alert. "What's the situation?" "We just lost contact with Patrol Delta 7, Martinez said, his usual swagger replaced by genuine concern. They were conducting a routine sweep of the western approaches when their radio went dead. No distress call, no indication of trouble. Just silence. Eliza felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Patrol Delta 7 was a four-man reconnaissance team led by Sergeant First Class Baker, one of the few soldiers who'd never participated in the daily mockery. They'd been monitoring enemy movement patterns for weeks, gathering intelligence on the increasing activity in the contested valley. "How long?" Williams asked. 47 minutes. Martinez checked his watch. "We've tried every frequency, sent drones over their last known position. Nothing. The implications hung in the air like smoke. 47 minutes was an eternity in combat operations. If Delta 7 had been compromised, it meant enemy forces were closer than intelligence had suggested. It meant the contested valley might not be so contested anymore. As the two sergeants hurried toward the command bunker, Thompson turned back to Eliza. "I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting around here," he said quietly. "When they do, remember what I said about special students and their abilities." Alone in the mess hall, Eliza stared at her cooling stew and tried to process what had just happened. Thompson knew more about her background than he was letting on. Williams was clearly someone who valued competence over politics, and somewhere in the valley below, 4 good soldiers were missing and possibly dead. She thought about Observation Post 9, with its advanced optics and clear sight lines across 2,000 yards of terrain. Tomorrow she'd be up there, watching the same area where Patrol Delta 7 had vanished. For the first time since arriving at the outpost, her assignment felt less like exile and more like opportunity. The wind howled outside, carrying with it the promise of storms and the whisper of distant gunfire. Change was coming to Tactical Outpost 87, whether anyone was ready for it or not. And for the first time in 18 months, Eliza Shaw felt like she might actually be part of it. The alarm that shattered the pre-dawn silence at 0347 hours wasn't the regular wake-up call. This was the combat alert, a harsh, stuttering wail that sent ice through every soldier's veins and brought the entire outpost to immediate readiness. Eliza was out of her bunk and into her gear before the second cycle finished, muscle memory overriding the confusion of sudden awakening. The command bunker was chaos when she arrived. Officers hunched over radio equipment, their faces grim in the green glow of tactical displays. Maps covered every available surface, marked with red X's that seemed to multiply even as she watched. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and barely controlled panic. "Shaw!" Captain Rodriguez spotted her immediately. "You're up early for your shift. The alarm, sir. Thought you might need. Patrol Delta 7 is confirmed KIA." The words hit like physical blows. Rodriguez's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the weight of command decisions that had gone horribly wrong. "Enemy!" Forces overran their position at approximately 0200. "We found their remains an hour ago. 4 men dead. 4 good soldiers who'd been doing their jobs, following orders, trusting that the intelligence reports were accurate." Sergeant Baker, who'd always nodded politely when passing her in the corridors. Private Collins, barely 19, who'd shown her pictures of his newborn daughter. Corporals Wayne and Murphy, the inseparable duo who'd served together since basic training. All dead because someone had miscalculated enemy strength and positioning. "That's not the worst part," Rodriguez continued, turning back to the tactical display. "The attack was a probe. Intelligence indicates a major offensive is being planned, with our outpost as the primary target. We're looking at a coordinated assault within the next 48 hours. Staff Sergeant Williams approached with a clipboard thick with personnel assignments. "Sir, we've got a problem with observation coverage. With Delta 7 gone, we're down 4 qualified spotters. Peterson and Rodriguez are both on medical restriction from that training accident last week. We're running short on bodies for the observation." "Posts. What about OP9? Rodriguez asked. "That's our primary early warning position. Shaw's assigned there," Williams replied, glancing at Eliza with an expression she couldn't quite read. "But sir, with respect, observation duty during a potential enemy offensive requires someone who can do more than just watch." The implication was clear. When the shooting started, she'd be useless. Just another liability in a position that might require split-second decisions between life and death. "I understand the concern," Rodriguez said slowly, studying the map with the intense focus of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "But we don't have qualified alternatives. Shaw, you'll be on OP9 as planned, but with enhanced communications. Equipment. If you spot anything, and I mean anything, you report it immediately." "Yes, sir." The words came out steadier than she felt. As the briefing continued, Eliza found herself studying the terrain maps with new eyes. OP9 wasn't just an observation post. It was the crown jewel of their defensive network. Positioned 800 feet above the valley floor, it offered unobstructed sight lines across nearly 2,000 yards of approach routes. Anyone attacking the outpost would have to cross that killing field, and whoever was watching from Opus to 9 would see them coming long before they posed a threat. The responsibility should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: purpose. The trek to Observation Post 9 took 47 minutes of climbing, treacherous mountain paths that would challenge an experienced rock climber. The post itself was a masterpiece of military engineering disguised as a pile of rocks, reinforced concrete walls buried under carefully arranged boulders, observation slits that were invisible from below, and enough supplies to sustain 2 soldiers for a week. The equipment inside made her breath catch. Advanced thermal imaging systems that could detect body heat from over a mile away. Laser range finders accurate to the centimeter. Communications gear that could reach satellite networks or coordinate close air support. And in the corner, secured, in a locked case that she definitely wasn't authorized to open, she caught a glimpse of what looked suspiciously like a precision rifle. "Impressive setup, isn't it?" The voice behind her nearly sent her diving for cover. Specialist Thompson stood in the entrance, carrying a field pack and wearing the kind of expression that suggested he had more to say. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her heart still pounding from the surprise. "Someone needs to show you how to operate the advanced systems," he replied, settling his pack near the communications console. "Captain Rodriguez asked me to make sure you're fully briefed on the equipment capabilities." It was a reasonable explanation, but something in his manner suggested there was more to it. Thompson moved around the observation post with the familiarity of someone who'd spent considerable time there, adjusting settings and checking connections with practiced efficiency. This thermal array can distinguish between human and animal heat signatures at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters. He explained, powering up systems that hummed with expensive precision. The laser designator is NATO-compatible for artillery or airstrikes, and this ... He gestured toward the locked case. "Well, that's above both our pay grades." They spent the next 2 hours going through every system, every protocol, every piece of equipment that might mean the difference between early warning and catastrophic surprise. Thompson was a patient teacher, but Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that he was evaluating her as much as instructing her. "Question," she said, as they finished the communications check. "How do you know so much about sniper equipment?" Thompson was quiet for a long moment, staring out through the observation slit at the valley below. "I spent 3 years as a spotter before they moved me to communications," he finally admitted. "Worked with some of the best marksmen in the military, including one who used to tell stories about a student named Shaw who could make shots that defied physics. The pieces clicked into place like a rifle bolt sliding home. Master Sergeant Carter, he said you were the most naturally gifted shooter he'd ever trained," Thompson continued. "Also said the military bureaucracy would probably waste your talent because they were too stupid to recognize it." He turned to face her directly. He was right about the bureaucracy part. Question is, was he right about the talent? Before she could answer, the radio crackled to life with Captain Rodriguez's voice. "All observation posts, this is command. We have confirmed enemy movement in sectors 7 through 12. Estimated company strength force, approximately 150. Hostiles moving toward our perimeter. All posts report contact immediately." Eliza moved to the thermal imaging display, her hands suddenly steady despite the implications of what she was hearing. The screen showed the valley in ghostly green detail, every rock formation and gully clearly defined. And there, moving with the disciplined precision of professional soldiers, were the heat signatures that meant death was coming to Tactical Outpost 87. "Command, this is Op-9," she said into the radio, surprised by the calm authority in her own voice. "I have visual on multiple enemy positions. Count approximately 180 hostiles in 3 separate groups. They're using the northwestern approach, staying below the ridgeline to avoid detection from the main outpost." "Copy that, OP-9. Maintain observation and report any changes." Thompson moved beside her, studying the thermal display with the trained eye of someone who'd done this before. "They're good," he admitted. "Professional spacing, disciplined movement, coordinated timing. This isn't some ragtag militia. These are trained soldiers. And they're heading straight for the outpost," Eliza added, tracking the movement patterns with growing concern. "Current speed and direction will put them in assault range within 6 hours. Unless someone stops them first," Thompson said quietly. The implication hung in the air between them like cordite smoke. The outpost defensive positions were designed to repel frontal assaults, not coordinated attacks by professional soldiers who knew how to use terrain and tactics. The math was simple and brutal. 180 attackers against 47 defenders meant everyone was probably going to die, unless someone with very special skills could change the odds before the battle even began. Thompson moved to the locked case and produced a key that definitely wasn't part of standard issue equipment. Carter left specific instructions, he said, opening the case to reveal a pristine M24 sniper rifle with advanced optics. He said if you ever needed this, the key would find its way to you. Eliza stared at the weapon that represented everything she'd lost and everything she might still become. In her hands, that rifle could reach out 1,000 yards and touch someone with surgical precision. In the right circumstances, one shot could save dozens of lives. This is highly irregular, she whispered. So is having 180 enemy soldiers about to overrun our position, Thompson replied. Command doesn't know about the rifle. They don't need to know unless you use it. And if you use it, he met her eyes directly. You better not miss. Outside, the wind howled through the mountain passes, carrying with it the sound of distant engines and the promise of violence. In 6 hours, the battle for Tactical Outpost 87 would begin. The only question was whether it would be a massacre or a miracle. Eliza Shaw picked up the M24 rifle, feeling its familiar weight settle into her hands like a lost piece of her soul returning home. For the first time in 18 months, she felt like herself again. The wait was almost over. The call came at 13:47 hours, crackling through the radio with the kind of urgency that made experienced soldiers reach for their weapons before their minds fully processed the words. All stations, this is Highway Command. Be advised, General Logan's convoy has departed forward operating Base Bravo. ETA to your location 16:30 hours. This is a priority movement. Repeat, priority movement. In Observation Post 9, Eliza lowered her binoculars and exchanged glances with Thompson, who had remained at the post despite officially completing his training mission 6 hours earlier. The timing couldn't have been worse. General Logan, the commanding officer of the entire regional command, was driving straight into what intelligence now confirmed was a coordinated enemy offensive. Command, this is OP9. Thompson keyed the radio. Advise Highway Command that hostile forces are currently positioned along the primary route. Recommend alternate routing or postponement. The response came back in Captain Rodriguez's tense voice. OP9, negative on postponement. General Logan is conducting emergency tactical assessment due to recent losses. Convoy will proceed as scheduled with enhanced security. Enhanced security. As if adding another Humvee would make a difference against 180 professional soldiers who'd been planning this ambush for weeks. Eliza returned to the thermal imaging display, tracking the enemy positions that had barely moved in the past 4 hours. They were waiting for something, probably the exact opportunity that General Logan's convoy was about to provide. They know, she said quietly. What do you mean? The enemy. They know about the convoy. She pointed to the thermal signatures clustered around the prime ambush positions along the mountain road. Look at their deployment. They're not positioned to attack the outpost. They're positioned to hit a moving target on the highway. Thompson studied the display, his expression growing darker as the tactical picture became clear. Inside information. Someone told them exactly when and where to wait. The implications were staggering. A security breach at this level meant the enemy had intelligence assets embedded within the command structure. General Logan wasn't just driving into an ambush. He was driving into a trap that had been specifically designed for him. We have to warn them, Eliza said, reaching for the radio. With what proof? Thompson replied grimly. We can report enemy positions, but we can't prove they're targeting the convoy specifically. Command will assume we're being overcautious. He was right, and they both knew it. Military hierarchy didn't reward soldiers who second-guessed general. Officers, especially when those soldiers were a communications specialist and a failed sniper candidate with credibility issues. The radio crackled again. OP9, this is command. We need continuous updates on enemy positions relative to Highway 7. General, Logan's convoy will be using standard route with minimal deviation. Roger, command. Thompson's voice was steady, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the microphone. Be advised, enemy forces are concentrated in Sectors 7 Alpha through 7 Charlie, with clear sight lines to the highway. Acknowledged. Convoy has been briefed on potential threats. Briefed on potential threats. As if awareness alone could stop a sniper's bullet from 800 yards away. Eliza moved to the observation slit that offered the clearest view of Highway 7 as it wound through the valley below. The road was a tactical nightmare, a narrow ribbon of asphalt that hugged the mountainside, with no cover and limited options for evasive maneuvers. Anyone traveling that route was completely exposed to fire from the elevated positions where enemy forces were now dug in. There, she said, pointing to a specific ridge formation about 900 yards from the highway. That's where I put my primary sniper. Perfect elevation, clear sight lines, multiple escape routes. Thompson joined her at the observation slit, following her pointing finger to the rocky outcropping that dominated the valley approach. You think there's someone up there? I know there is. She adjusted the high-powered scope, bringing the distant ridge into sharp focus. Third boulder from the left, about 20 feet below the crest. You can just make out the barrel of a rifle if you know what to look for. Thompson squinted through his own binoculars, scanning the area she'd indicated. After several seconds, he lowered the glasses with a frustrated shake of his head. I don't see anything. Because you're looking for the rifle, Eliza explained patiently. Look for the shadow that's slightly wrong, the rock formation that's just a little too regular. The human eye wants to see patterns, so a good sniper uses that against you. She guided him through the process, teaching him the same techniques. Master Sergeant Carter had drilled into her during 2 years of intensive training. How to read terrain like a book. How to spot the subtle signs that marked a professional's position. How to think like a predator who lived by remaining invisible. Until the moment of the kill. There, Thompson said suddenly. Something just moved behind that boulder. Muzzle flash suppressor, Eliza confirmed. He's adjusting his position for the convoy's approach, probably zeroing his scope for the exact range to the highway. The tactical picture was now crystal clear. General Logan's convoy would round the bend at 1630 hours, moving at standard convoy speed along a predictable route. The enemy sniper, positioned at optimal range with perfect concealment, would have approximately 45 seconds to take a shot before the convoy passed beyond the engagement zone. It was a textbook assassination setup, and there was nothing either of them could do to stop it. Command, this is OP-9. Thompson tried again. We have positive identification of sniper positions overlooking Highway 7. Strongly recommend convoy delay until threat can be neutralized. OP-9. Convoy is already en route. ADA 15 minutes. We need you to maintain observation and provide real-time updates on enemy positions. 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, General Logan would die unless someone did something extraordinary. Eliza looked at the M24 rifle still secured in its case. Then at the thermal display, showing the enemy sniper's position exactly 874 yards away. The math was simple. She had the weapon, she had the skills, and she had a clear shot. What she didn't have was authorization, backup, or any guarantee that she wouldn't face court-martial for unauthorized use of deadly force. The wind's wrong, Thompson said quietly, reading her thoughts. Gusting from the northwest at about 15 knots, with thermal layers that'll throw off your calculations. I know. She was already running the ballistics in her head, compensating for wind speed, atmospheric pressure, and the temperature differential between the observation post and the target area. Range 874 yards, elevation difference 347 feet, wind drift approximately 2.3 inches at that distance. That's assuming the wind stays consistent, Thompson pointed out. One gust at the wrong moment and you'll miss by feet instead of inches. Then I won't miss. The confidence in her own voice surprised her. 18 months of self-doubt and institutional dismissal had nearly convinced her that she really was just a failed sniper candidate with shaky hands. But holding the possibility of action, feeling the familiar weight of precision equipment, brought back everything Master Sergeant Carter had taught her about the difference between soldiers who could shoot and warriors who could kill when it mattered most. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical display and the distant ridge where death waited in professional patience. "If you take this shot," he said finally, "there's no going back. Command will want explanations. There'll be investigations, review boards, questions about authorization and chain of command. And if I don't take it, General Logan dies in 12 minutes. Probably. Definitely." She was already unlocking the rifle case, her hands moving with the muscle memory of someone who'd performed these actions thousands of times in training. The question isn't whether I'll face consequences. The question is whether I can live with doing nothing when I have the skills to make a difference. The M24 felt like coming home. The stock settled against her shoulder with familiar comfort, the scope aligned with her eye as if it had been custom-fitted. Master Sergeant Carter had always said that truly gifted shooters didn't use their rifles. They became part of them, an extension of their will made manifest in steel and precision. Through the scope, the enemy sniper's position jumped into crystal clarity. She could see the carefully arranged camouflage, the precisely calculated angles, the professional setup. That spoke of years of training and dozens of confirmed kills. This wasn't some amateur with a hunting rifle. This was an expert marksman who'd probably never missed a shot that mattered. Today would be his first. 9 minutes, Thompson announced, tracking the convoy's progress on GPS. "They're making good time." Eliza began her breathing exercises, the rhythmic patterns that slowed her heart rate and steadied her hands. In her mind, she could hear Carter's voice. "Shooting is 10% technique and 90% mind control. Control your breathing, control your heartbeat, control your thoughts. Everything else is just mathematics." 8 minutes. 7. 6. The enemy sniper moved again, adjusting his position for the final shot. Through her scope, Eliza could see him settling into the perfect firing stance, his weapon trained on the exact point where General Logan's convoy would appear around the mountain curve. 5 minutes. Thompson's voice was tight with tension. "Convoy is approaching the danger zone." Eliza made her final calculations, accounting for every variable that could affect the bullet's trajectory over 874 yards of mountain air. Wind speed, humidity, temperature gradients, even the slight rotation of the earth during the bullet's flight time. Master Sergeant Carter had taught her that perfect shots weren't made by perfect conditions. They were made by perfect compensation for imperfect conditions. "Command, this is OP9. Thompson tried one last time. We have positive target acquisition on hostile sniper. Request permission to engage." "Negative, OP9. You are not authorized for weapons engagement. Continue observation." "Only." Thompson looked at Eliza, who was now fully settled into her shooting position. Her breathing had steadied to the slow, rhythmic pattern of someone in complete control. Her hands, the same hands that had supposedly trembled during her academy failure, were rock steady on the rifle. "No one's going to authorize this," he said quietly. "I know. If you miss, General Logan dies. I won't miss. If you don't miss, your career is probably over." She turned to look at him directly, her eyes clear and determined. "Marcus, 80 months ago, I let bureaucratic cowards convince me that I wasn't good enough to do the job I was born for. I let their sabotage become my shame. I let their limitations become my limitations. She turned back to the scope. Not today. 3 minutes, Thompson announced. Convoy is in the final approach. Through her scope, Eliza watched the enemy sniper make his final preparations. He was good. She could see it in every movement, every adjustment, every professional habit that marked years of successful kills. Under different circumstances, she might have respected his skill. Today, that skill was going to get him killed. 2 minutes. Convoy is visible from sniper position. The radio crackled with convoy traffic. Highway 7. This is Logan Actual. Approaching checkpoint Charlie. No signs of hostile activity, because they couldn't see what she could see. They couldn't see the professional killer waiting with infinite patience for the perfect moment. They couldn't see the crosshairs already trained on the exact spot where the general's vehicle would pass. 1 minute, Thompson whispered. Eliza's world narrowed to the circle of her scope, the crosshairs perfectly aligned on the enemy sniper's position. Her breathing slowed to match her heartbeat. Her finger found the trigger's sweet spot, that precise pressure point between safety and action. Through the scope, she saw the enemy sniper shift slightly, preparing for his shot. In 30 seconds, General Logan's convoy would round the curve and enter his kill zone. In 35 seconds, the sniper would squeeze his trigger and change the course of the war. Unless she squeezed hers first. Now or never, Thompson said. Eliza Shaw, the failed sniper candidate who cleaned rifles for real soldiers, took a breath, held it, and made her choice. The shot that changed everything was barely audible above the mountain wind. The M24's report echoed off the mountain walls. Like thunder, the sound rolling through the valley in waves that seemed to last forever. In the sudden silence that followed, Eliza kept her eye pressed to the scope, watching the distant ridge where her target had been positioned. The enemy sniper was gone. Not ducking for cover, not repositioning for a better angle. Gone. Through her scope, she could see his rifle tumbling down the rocky slope, the carefully arranged camouflage disrupted, and what looked like a spray of dark liquid on the boulder where he'd been hiding. Jesus Christ, Thompson whispered, his binoculars trained on the same position. Did you just... Hostile sniper neutralized, Eliza said into the radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Convoy is cleared to proceed. The radio exploded with confused chatter. OP9, confirm your last transmission. Did you say sniper neutralized? Confirmed, command. Enemy sniper eliminated at range 874 yards. Convoy route is secure. In the valley below, General Logan's convoy rounded the curve exactly where the enemy sniper had been waiting. 3 armored vehicles moving at tactical speed, completely unaware that death had been waiting for them until 30 seconds ago. The lead vehicle's occupants would never know how close they'd come to becoming casualties of a war. They were trying to manage from behind the safety of command posts and tactical briefings. OP9, this is command. Captain. Rodriguez's voice carried a mixture of confusion and something that might have been awe. What was your firing position? We shall know authorized sniper assets at your location. Before Eliza could answer, Thompson keyed the radio. Command, Specialist Shaw engaged the target using personal equipment. She had clear sight lines and opportunity to prevent imminent threat to General Logan's convoy. Personal equipment? Rodriguez's voice climbed an octave. Shaw, are you telling me you made a 900-yard shot with unauthorized weapons? 874 yards, sir. And yes. The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded either medals or court-martials. Eliza continued watching through her scope, documenting the aftermath of her shot for the investigation that would inevitably follow. The enemy sniper's body was visible now, sprawled behind the boulder in the boneless posture of sudden death. Her bullet had taken him center mass, A clean kill that had ended his threat instantly. All stations, this is Logan Actual. The new voice on the radio carried the authority of command and the gratitude of someone who'd just avoided assassination. Be advised, my convoy observed muzzle flash from enemy position approximately 2 minutes ago, followed immediately by what appeared to be effective counter-sniper fire. Requesting immediate confirmation of friendly forces responsible. Logan Actual, this is Tactical Command, Rodriguez replied. Confirming friendly sniper engagement from observation post. 9. Target neutralized, threat eliminated. Outstanding work, Tactical Command. Logan Actual requests immediate debrief with the sniper responsible upon arrival at your location. Eliza slowly lowered her rifle, the magnitude of what had just happened beginning to sink in. She'd killed a man. Not in the abstract way that soldiers sometimes killed during firefights, spraying bullets into smoke and hoping for the best, but with deliberate precision. She'd looked through a scope, made calculations, and ended a human life with a single, perfect shot. The strange thing was she felt no guilt. The enemy sniper had been moments away from murdering General Logan and potentially altering the course of the entire conflict. She'd prevented an assassination, saved lives, and proven that her skills were real despite 18 months of institutional doubt. You realize what you just done? Thompson asked quietly. Saved General Logan's life. More than that. He was studying her with an expression she'd never seen before, respect mixed with something approaching reverence. You've just made the longest confirmed kill shot in this theater of operations. With an unauthorized weapon from an observation post, under combat conditions that would challenge snipers with decades of experience. The radio crackled again. OP-9, this is command. General Logan's convoy will arrive at 16:47 hours. You are directed to remain in position and prepare for immediate debriefing. Do not discuss this engagement with anyone until you've spoken with General Logan personally. Roger, command. Thompson began securing the equipment, but his movements were distracted, almost mechanical. Eliza, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay, that shot you just made. The wind. Compensation, the elevation adjustments, the mathematical precision required. That's graduate-level marksmanship. That's the kind of shooting that maybe 50 people in the entire military can do under ideal conditions. He turned to face her directly. How the hell did someone with your supposed skill level make that shot? She'd been dreading this question for 18 months, but now that it was finally asked, the answer came easier than she'd expected. Because my skill level isn't what the official records say it is. What do you mean? I mean, I was sabotaged at Blackwater, deliberately, by people who couldn't accept that a woman might outshoot them. The words came out in a rush, 18 months of suppressed truth finally finding voice. My final qualification was rigged to make me fail. Sergeant Reynolds made sure I didn't make the cut, not because I lacked ability, but because I had too much of it. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Can you prove it? Does it matter? I just made a shot that proves everything the Academy said about me was wrong. It matters because General Logan is going to want answers. Real answers. And if there's evidence of deliberate sabotage in military training programs, that's the kind of thing that ends careers and changes policies. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching vehicles echoed up from the valley. General Logan's convoy was making good time, probably eager to reach the safety of the outpost after their close encounter with enemy fire. In less than an hour, she'd be face to face with the commanding officer whose life she'd just saved, trying to explain how a failed sniper candidate had made an impossible shot. There's something else, Thompson said, his voice carefully neutral. Master Sergeant Carter left specific instructions about what to do if you ever had to use that rifle. What kind of instructions? He produced a sealed envelope from his pack, marked with her name in Carter's distinctive handwriting. He said to give you this if you ever proved the Blackwater got it wrong. Eliza opened the envelope with trembling fingers, revealing a single sheet of military letterhead covered in Carter's precise script. Shaw, if you're reading this, it means you've finally shown the world what I always knew you could do. The shot you just made is proof that talent can't be buried by bureaucracy or destroyed by jealousy. I've included documentation of your actual performance at Blackwater, including video evidence of the sabotage during your final qualification. Use it wisely. The military needs soldiers like you, whether they realize it or not. MSG T. Carter. Attached to the letter were official forms, video recordings, and witness statements that painted a completely different picture of her academy experience. Evidence that her failure had been orchestrated. Proof that she'd actually scored higher than any candidate in the program's history before the deliberate sabotage. He knew, she whispered. Carter knew what they did to me. He also knew you'd get a chance to prove them wrong, Thompson replied. Question is, what are you going to do with that proof? Through the observation slit, she could see General Logan's convoy climbing the mountain road toward the outpost. In 30 minutes, she'd be sitting across from one of the most powerful officers in the military, with documented evidence of institutional sabotage and a perfect shot that proved her capabilities beyond any doubt. For 80 months, she'd accepted other people's assessment of her worth. She'd cleaned rifles for soldiers who couldn't make the shots she'd just demonstrated. She'd absorbed mockery and dismissal from people whose entire careers depended on skills she'd mastered years ago. I'm going to tell the truth, she said finally. All of it. And then I'm going to let General Logan decide what happens next. The wind was shifting, carrying with it the promise of storms and the whisper of change. In the valley below, enemy forces were probably wondering what had happened to their sniper. At the outpost, her fellow soldiers were about to discover that the woman they dismissed as useless had just saved their commanding general's life. Everything was about to change. And for the first time in 18 months, Eliza Shaw was ready for it. General Patricia Logan was not what Eliza had expected. At 52, she moved with the controlled grace of someone who'd earned her stars through competence rather than politics. Her silver hair pulled back in a regulation style that somehow managed to look both professional and elegant. When she entered the command bunker at 17:34 hours, every soldier in the room snapped to attention with the kind of genuine respect that couldn't be faked. At ease, Logan said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that came from 30 years of military service. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the tactical displays and nervous faces before settling on Captain Rodriguez. I understand I owe someone in this room my life. Yes, ma'am, Rodriguez replied, his usual confidence replaced by the careful deference due to senior command. Specialist Shaw, from Observation Post 9, made the shot that eliminated the sniper targeting your convoy. Shaw. Logan's gaze found Eliza immediately, studying her with the intensity of someone who'd learned to evaluate soldiers quickly and accurately. The same Shaw who's listed in your personnel files as a failed sniper candidate? Yes, ma'am. Interesting. Logan's expression revealed nothing, but something in her tone suggested she'd already drawn conclusions that others might find uncomfortable. I'd like to speak with Specialist Shaw privately. Everyone else dismissed. The command bunker emptied quickly, leaving only Eliza, General Logan, and the weight of 18 months of suppressed truth hanging in the air between them. Logan gestured toward the tactical display where the enemy sniper's position was still marked with red symbols. 874 yards, Logan said, reading from the engagement report. Adverse wind conditions, thermal layering, and a moving target window of less than 30 seconds. She turned to face Eliza directly. That's not a shot that a failed candidate makes by accident. No, ma'am. It's also not a shot that someone makes without extensive training and considerable natural ability. Logan's eyes narrowed slightly, which raises questions about how someone with those qualifications ended up cleaning rifles instead of carrying them. Eliza felt the moment of truth arriving like a freight train. She could offer excuses, blame circumstances, or try to minimize what had happened at Blackwater. Or she could trust that the general who just survived an assassination attempt might be interested in the truth. General, with your permission, I have documentation that explains the discrepancy. Show me. Eliza produced Carter's envelope, spreading the contents across the tactical table. Video recordings, witness statements, performance evaluations, and photographic evidence of the sabotage that had ended her sniper career before it began. 18 months of buried truth laid out in black and white. Logan studied the documents with the methodical attention of someone accustomed to separating facts from fiction. She watched the video recordings twice, her expression growing darker as the evidence mounted. When she finished, she was quiet for several long minutes. "Master, Sergeant Carter," she said finally. "I knew him. Served with him in Afghanistan back when I was a captain. If he said you were gifted, that wasn't a casual assessment. He was the best instructor I ever had. He was the best instructor anyone ever had." Logan gathered the documents, her movements precise and controlled. This evidence shows deliberate sabotage of a military training program, falsification of official records, and systematic discrimination based on gender. That's enough to end careers and trigger congressional investigations. Yes, ma'am. It also shows that for 18 months, this outpost has been wasting the talents of someone who could have saved lives and prevented casualties. Logan's voice carried the cold anger of a commander who just discovered institutional failure on her watch. How many enemy snipers have we failed to engage because our best marksman was relegated to cleaning duties? The question hung in the air like smoke from a rifle barrel. Eliza had wondered the same thing during countless nights lying in her bunk, listening to casualty reports from other outposts that might have been prevented by better sniper coverage. "I don't know, ma'am." "Neither do I, but I intend to find out." Logan's expression softened slightly, revealing something approaching maternal concern. "Specialist Shaw, I need you to understand something. The shot you made today didn't just save my life. It exposed a systematic problem that's been degrading our operational effectiveness. This isn't just about one soldier's career anymore." "I understand, ma'am. Do you? Because what I'm about to do is going to turn this entire command structure upside down. There will be investigations, transfers, and consequences for people who thought they were untouchable." Logan leaned forward slightly. "Are you prepared for that level of attention?" Eliza thought about 80 months of mockery and dismissal. She thought about Staff Sergeant Martinez telling her that cleaning guns wasn't the same as using them. She thought about Peterson's cruel jokes and Reynolds' deliberate sabotage. She thought about all the times she'd accepted other people's limitations as her own. "General, I've spent a year and a half being told I wasn't good enough to do the job I was trained for. Today, I proved that assessment was wrong. If exposing that truth helps other soldiers avoid the same injustice, then yes, I'm prepared for the attention." Logan smiled for the first time since entering the bunker. "Good answer. Now, let's discuss your immediate future, ma'am. As of right now, you're being transferred to my personal staff as a precision weapons specialist. You'll be responsible for establishing new sniper training protocols, evaluating current marksmen, and ensuring that we never again waste talent due to bureaucratic incompetence." Logan's tone became formal, official. "You'll also be receiving the medals and recognition that should have been yours 18 months ago." The words hit like physical blows. After so long accepting that her dreams were dead, the sudden resurrection of possibility was almost overwhelming. General, I don't know what to say. Say you'll do the job you were born for. Yes, ma'am. Excellent. Now, let's go address your fellow soldiers. I have some announcements to make. The mess hall was packed when General Logan entered. Every soldier at the outpost crammed into the space that normally held maybe half their number. Word had spread quickly about the impossible shot, and everyone wanted to hear what the commanding general had to say about it. Logan took position at the front of the room, her presence commanding immediate silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here because one of your fellow soldiers saved my life today. Specialist Shaw made a precision shot under adverse conditions that eliminated an enemy sniper and prevented my assassination. A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew about the shot by now, but hearing it confirmed by General Logan herself made it real in a way that rumors couldn't match. However, Logan continued, her voice carrying the sharp edge of command authority, I've also discovered that Specialist Shaw has been systematically underutilized due to false information in her personnel file. Information that was deliberately falsified by individuals who thought their prejudices were more important than our mission effectiveness. The murmur became uncomfortable silence. Logan's tone promised consequences that nobody wanted to contemplate. Effective immediately, there will be a complete review of all personnel evaluations and training records. Anyone found to have participated in deliberate sabotage or discrimination will face immediate disciplinary action, including possible court-martial. Her eyes swept the room, making contact with specific individuals whose faces had gone pale. This command will operate on merit, not politics, period. Staff Sergeant Martinez, who'd spent months mocking Eliza's abilities, looked like he'd swallowed something toxic. Corporal Peterson appeared to be reconsidering every joke he'd ever made at her expense. Even Captain Rodriguez seemed uncomfortable, probably wondering what else might be hidden in the personnel files he'd trusted. Specialist Shaw, Logan called out. Front and center. Eliza made her way through the crowd, feeling hundreds of eyes following her movement. The same soldiers who dismissed her as furniture were now watching her with expressions ranging from shock to grudging respect to barely concealed fear. Ladies and gentlemen, Logan announced, your new precision weapons specialist and sniper training coordinator. I suggest you listen carefully to anything she has to say about marksmanship, because the shot she made today is one that maybe 50 people in the entire military could execute under those conditions. The silence was absolute. 18 months of assumptions, prejudices, and casual cruelty had just been shattered by a single announcement from the most powerful officer most of them would ever meet. Dismissed, Logan concluded. All senior staff report to the command bunker in 30 minutes. We have new protocols to establish. As the crowd dispersed, Eliza found herself surrounded by the same soldiers who'd made her life miserable for months. But their expressions had changed. The mockery was gone, replaced by something she'd never seen directed at her before: respect. Thompson approached first, wearing a grin that could have powered the entire outpost. So, he said quietly, how does it feel to be right about everything? Terrifying, she admitted. Good. The best snipers are always a little scared. It keeps them sharp. Martinez appeared next, his usual swagger completely absent. Specialist Shaw, I owe you an apology. A big one. You owe me your life, she replied calmly. If that sniper had succeeded, his next targets would have been the leadership of this outpost. That includes you. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. What can I do to make it right? Start treating soldiers based on their abilities instead of your assumptions. Yes, ma'am. One by one, the others approached with variations of the same theme: apology, respect, and the desperate hope that their previous behavior wouldn't be held against them. Eliza accepted their words graciously, but she didn't forget. Change was coming to Tactical Outpost 87, and everyone would have to prove they deserved to be part of it. As the mess hall finally emptied, she stood alone with the weight of transformation settling around her like a new uniform. In 18 months, she'd gone from promising sniper candidate to failed washout to rifle cleaner to the soldier who'd saved a general's life with an impossible shot. Tomorrow, she'd begin the work of ensuring that no other talented soldier would suffer the same injustice she'd endured. But tonight, for the first time in months, Eliza Shaw allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she belonged. The war was far from over, but one battle, the most important one, had finally been won. The investigation began at 0600 hours the next morning, led by Colonel Patricia Hayes from the Inspector General's office. Hayes was a thin, sharp-eyed woman who'd built her career on exposing institutional failures and holding people accountable for their decisions. When she walked into the command bunker carrying 3 file boxes and wearing the expression of someone who smelled blood in the water, everyone knew that careers were about to end. "Gentlemen," Hayes announced to the assembled, "officers, we have a problem. Not just with one fraudulent evaluation, but with a pattern of discriminatory practices that extends back several years and involves multiple installations." Captain Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. He'd spent the night reviewing every personnel file, trying to identify other cases where capable soldiers might have been sidelined by prejudice or politics. The results had been depressing and professionally embarrassing. "How extensive?" General Logan asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. "Extensive enough to trigger a congressional investigation," Hayes replied, opening her first file box. "We've identified 17 separate incidents at 5 different installations where female soldiers with exceptional qualifications were failed out of advanced training programs under suspicious circumstances. Shaw's case isn't unique. It's just the most dramatic." The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded mass resignations and career-ending transfers. Hayes began distributing documents that painted a picture of systemic bias that went far beyond individual prejudice. Master Sergeant Reynolds, the instructor who failed Shaw at Blackwater, has been under investigation for 6 months. Hayes continued, "We have evidence that he deliberately sabotaged female candidates who scored higher than their male counterparts. Shaw was actually his 6th victim. 6 qualified snipers," Logan said quietly, "lost to the military because one instructor couldn't accept that women might be better shooters than men." 6 that we know of," Hayes corrected. "The investigation is ongoing." Eliza sat in the corner of the bunker, officially present as a witness, but feeling like she was watching someone else's life unfold. The documents Hayes was revealing painted a picture of conspiracy that went far beyond her personal experience. She'd thought her sabotage was isolated, personal. Learning that it was part of a broader pattern made it somehow worse and better simultaneously. "What about the personnel at this outpost?" Logan asked. "Were they complicit in maintaining the false narrative about Shaw's abilities?" Hayes consulted her notes. "Most appear to have been misled rather than deliberately deceptive. They based their treatment of Shaw on false information in her file, not personal knowledge of her failure." She paused. "However, there are exceptions." Staff Sergeant Martinez, who'd been standing at attention near the back of the room, visibly paled. His months of public mockery and deliberate humiliation were about to be examined under the harsh light of official scrutiny. "Sergeant Martinez," Hayes called out, "your conduct towards Specialist Shaw has been documented by multiple witnesses. Care to explain why you thought it appropriate to publicly demean a fellow soldier based on unverified information?" Martinez opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no good answer to that question, and everyone in the room knew it. I was wrong, ma'am. I let personal bias cloud my judgment. personal bias. Hayes repeated the words like they tasted bad. Is that what you call systematic harassment and deliberate humiliation of a soldier under your command? No excuse. Ma'am, you're right. There is no excuse. Hayes made a note in her file. You're being transferred to a desk assignment pending full review. Your actions potentially compromised operational security by ensuring our most qualified marksman was relegated to support duties. The mathematics of military justice were simple and brutal. Martinez's career was effectively over, killed by his own prejudice and stupidity. 20 years of service destroyed because he couldn't see past his assumptions about women and warfare. Hayes turned her attention to Captain Rodriguez. Captain, as commanding officer, you bear responsibility for the morale and effective utilization of your personnel. How did you miss the fact that your supposed logistics specialist was making maintenance adjustments to precision weapons that exceeded manufacturer specifications? Rodriguez had clearly been dreading this question. Ma'am, I trusted the accuracy of her personnel file. If I'd known her actual qualifications, you would have what? Actually evaluated her capabilities instead of accepting paperwork as gospel? Hayes' voice carried the disappointed tone of someone who'd seen this kind of institutional failure too many times. Captain, effective leadership requires you to assess your people based on their demonstrated abilities, not bureaucratic assumptions. Yes, ma'am. You're being reassigned to a training command where you can learn proper personnel evaluation techniques. Your replacement will arrive next week. One by one, Hayes worked through the chain of failures that had kept Eliza trapped in the wrong job for 18 months. Some officers had been woefully blind, others merely incompetent, but all had contributed to a system that wasted talent and endangered lives. Now, Hayes said, closing her second file box, let's discuss what happens next. General Logan leaned forward. I assume there will be policy changes? Comprehensive ones. All advanced training programs will implement blind evaluation protocols. Video recording will be mandatory for final qualifications. And we're establishing an independent review board for any candidate who claims discriminatory treatment. Hayes smiled grimly. We're also retroactively reviewing every female soldier who's been failed out of combat training in the past 5 years. How many? Potentially hundreds. This investigation is going to reshape how the military approaches advanced training and personnel evaluation. Eliza felt the weight of unintended consequence settling on her shoulders. Her single shot hadn't just saved General Logan's life. It had triggered a systemic examination that would affect thousands of soldiers and fundamentally alter military culture. Specialist Shaw, Hayes called out. I need to ask you something directly. Given everything you've endured, do you still want to serve in the military? The question caught her off guard. She'd been so focused on proving her abilities that she hadn't considered whether she actually wanted to continue in an institution that had treated her so poorly. Ma'am, I joined the military to serve my country and use my skills to protect other soldiers. That hasn't changed, regardless of how individuals have treated me. Good answer. Because the Army needs leaders who understand both excellence and injustice. Hayes consulted her final set of documents. You're being promoted to sergeant and assigned to establish the new Advanced Marksmanship Training Center at Fort Benning. You'll be responsible for developing programs that identify and nurture talent regardless of gender, race, or background. The promotion hit like a physical shock. From failed candidate to program director in less than 24 hours. The military's capacity for dramatic change, when properly motivated, was almost frightening. Additionally, Hayes continued, you'll be receiving the Distinguished Service Cross for your actions yesterday. The citation will specifically mention your courage in taking unauthorized action to prevent an assassination under adverse conditions. General Logan smiled. The ceremony will be next month at the Pentagon. Full dress uniform, media coverage, the complete spectacle. The military needs heroes, and it especially needs heroes who represent the changes we're trying to make. As the meeting concluded and the participants filed out, Eliza remained seated, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. 18 months of suffering had been transformed into platform for change. Her personal vindication had become institutional reform. Thompson approached as the room emptied. "So," he said, "any regrets about taking that shot?" "None whatsoever." "Good, because you're about to become the poster child for military reform. That comes with its own challenges." She nodded, understanding the implications. Her story would be told and retold, analyzed and scrutinized, used as evidence in debates about military culture and gender equality. The quiet soldier who just wanted to do her job would become a symbol whether she liked it or not. "Marcus," she said quietly, "thank you for believing in me when nobody else did, for having that key when I needed it, for everything. Thank you for proving that Master Sergeant Carter was right about special students and their abilities." As they walked out of the command bunker together, Eliza felt the weight of 18 months of frustration and humiliation finally lifting from her shoulders. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been delivered with precision that would have made Carter proud. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to prove that talent couldn't be buried by prejudice. But tonight, for the first time since arriving at Tactical Outpost 87, she was exactly who she was supposed to be. Sergeant Eliza Shaw, precision weapons specialist, and the soldier who'd changed everything with a single perfect shot. The war against injustice was far from over. The one decisive battle had been won. And sometimes, that was enough to change the world. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Eliza Shaw stood on the observation deck of the Advanced Marksmanship Training Center at Fort Benning, watching the latest class of sniper candidates work through their final qualification exercises. The facility was everything she dreamed of during those long nights at Tactical Outpost 87. State-of-the-art equipment, comprehensive training protocols, and most importantly, evaluation systems that measured ability rather than assumptions. Candidate Harrison, shot group 0.4 inches at 800 yards, announced Sergeant First Class Thompson, who'd requested transfer to serve as her deputy instructor. Candidate Martinez, 0.6 inches. He paused, checking his scope. And Candidate Rivera, perfect 0. 3 shots through the same hole at 800 yards. Eliza smiled as she watched Candidate Rivera, a 22-year-old woman from Texas, whose application had been rejected twice by other programs before the new evaluation protocols were implemented. Her natural ability was extraordinary, but under the old system, she would have been dismissed for lack of aggression or insufficient physical presence, or any of the dozen coded phrases that had been used to exclude qualified women. Rivera's got potential, Thompson said, joining Eliza on the observation deck. Her mathematical calculations are faster than the computer systems. I've never seen anything like it. Master Sergeant Carter always said the best shooters think in numbers, Eliza replied. Everything else is just equipment. The Advanced Marksmanship Training Center had graduated 147 snipers in its first 6 months of operation. 43 of them were women. The military's precision weapons capabilities had improved by measurable percentages, directly attributed to the expanded talent pool that came from evaluating soldiers based on ability rather than preconceptions. Speaking of Carter, Thompson said, producing an envelope from his jacket. This came through official channels yesterday. The letter was brief, but characteristic of her old instructor's direct communication style. Shaw heard about the training center. Numbers don't lie, and your numbers prove what I always knew. Talent finds a way to surface when given the opportunity. The military is better for your service, and the country is safer for your skills. Master Sergeant Carter, retired. Attached was a newspaper clipping from his hometown paper in Montana, showing him at a veteran's ceremony, wearing a proud smile, and a t-shirt that read, "I trained Shaw." Apparently, his famous student's story had made him something of a local celebrity. "He's doing speaking engagements now," Thompson added. "Talks about the importance of recognizing potential wherever it exists. Uses your story as the primary example." Before Eliza could respond, her radio crackled with an incoming call from the main administration building. "Sergeant Shaw, you have visitors at the front gate. General Logan and someone from the Secretary of the Army's office." On my way. The drive to the front gate took 12 minutes through the sprawling complex that had become her professional home. The Advanced Marksmanship Training Center occupied 3,000 acres of Georgia countryside, with shooting ranges that extended to 1,500 yards and facilities that rivaled anything in the world. It was everything a precision weapons instructor could want, and it existed because one shot had proven that the military was wasting its most valuable resource, human potential. General Logan waited in the visitor's center, accompanied by a thin man in an expensive suit who radiated the confidence of someone accustomed to wielding political power. The suit suggested civilian authority at the highest levels. "Sergeant Shaw," Logan said, offering her hand with the genuine warmth that had characterized their relationship since that day at Tactical Outpost 87. "I'd like you to meet Deputy Secretary Morrison from the Secretary of the Army's office." Morrison studied her with the calculating gaze of someone who saw political opportunity in personal stories. "Sergeant Shaw, your transformation from overlooked support personnel to decorated instructor has become something of a phenomenon in Washington. The Secretary would like to discuss expanding your program nationally." "Expanding how, sir?" "Every branch of service. Marines, Navy, Air Force, they all want their own versions of what you've built here." Morrison gestured toward the training facilities visible through the window. "Your success rates are unprecedented, and more importantly, your graduates are saving lives in the field." It was true. Reports from active combat zones consistently showed that snipers trained under the new protocols were more effective, more adaptable, and more precise than their predecessors. The mathematical approach Carter had taught her, combined with evaluation systems that identified natural ability regardless of demographics, was producing results that couldn't be argued with. "There's also the congressional hearing next month," Logan added. "The House Armed Services Committee wants your testimony about discriminatory practices in military training. Your story has become the centerpiece of proposed legislation." Eliza nodded, though the prospect of congressional testimony still made her uncomfortable. She joined the military to serve quietly and professionally, not to become the face of institutional reform. But her single shot had made her a symbol whether she wanted it or not. "Sergeant, I need to ask you something directly," Morrison said. "Are you prepared for the level of scrutiny that comes with national expansion? Your background will be examined, your methods questioned, your results challenged. Not everyone is happy about the changes you've forced. I understand, sir. But the results speak for themselves. They do indeed." Morrison smiled for the first time since arriving. "Which is why the Secretary wants to offer you a direct commission to captain, with orders to establish training centers at 5 additional installations within the next 18 months. Captain." The promotion would skip her past multiple enlisted ranks directly into the officer corps. It was unprecedented, extraordinary, and terrifying in its implications. "Sir, I'm honored, but I need to ask, why me? There are officers with more experience, more education, more political savvy." "Because," Logan interjected, "you understand something that career officers sometimes forget, that the military's greatest strength isn't its equipment or its tactics, it's its people. And you've proven that we've been wasting our most valuable people due to prejudice and short-sightedness. Morrison nodded. The Secretary believes that institutional change requires leaders who've experienced institutional failure. You've been on both sides of the system. You understand what it's like to be dismissed and what it takes to prove the dismissal wrong. Before she could respond, Thompson's voice crackled over her radio. Sergeant Shaw, we have a situation on Range 7. Candidate Rivera's attempting a 1,200-yard shot that she says you taught her to calculate. Eliza grinned. Excuse me, gentlemen. I need to see this. The drive to Range 7 took them past groups of candidates engaged in various aspects of training. The diversity was striking. Men and women of different races, backgrounds and ages, all united by their exceptional shooting abilities and their commitment to precision. It was the military Carter had always envisioned, a meritocracy where talent determined opportunity. Range 7 was buzzing with activity as they arrived. Candidate Rivera lay prone behind a precision rifle, her eye pressed to the scope as she made final calculations for a shot that would challenge experienced snipers. The target, a silhouette at 1,200 yards, was barely visible even through binoculars. Wind speed 12 knots from the northwest. Rivera called out, her voice steady despite the pressure of performing for senior officers. Temperature 73 degrees. Humidity 68%. Target elevation 47 feet below firing position. Approved for fire, Thompson announced. The shot cracked across the range like thunder, followed by the electronic tone that indicated a hit. Perfect center mass at 1,200 yards on the first attempt, by a candidate who'd been rejected by other programs for insufficient qualifications. Outstanding, Logan said quietly. How many candidates can make that shot? Under optimal conditions, maybe 1 in 50, Eliza replied. Under these conditions, with this wind, maybe 1 in 100. Rivera's exceptional. So were you, once upon a time. They watched as Rivera secured her weapon and began the process of documenting her shot for the training records. Her movements were precise, professional, and confident in a way that reminded Eliza of herself during those early days with Carter. Candidate Rivera, she called out. Outstanding shooting. But I want you to explain your wind compensation calculations too. Sergeant Thompson. Yes, ma'am. Rivera approached with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved the technical aspects of precision shooting. The wind was gusting, so I calculated for the average velocity over the bullet's flight time rather than the instantaneous reading. At 1,200 yards, with this ammunition, flight time is approximately 1.4 seconds, so ... As Rivera launched into a detailed explanation of ballistics mathematics that would challenge graduate students, Morrison turned to Eliza with raised eyebrows. Is she always this technically precise? The best ones are. They understand that precision shooting is applied physics. The better they understand the science, the more consistent their results. And under your old evaluation system, she would have been dismissed during the first week for asking too many questions. The morning continued with demonstrations of various training protocols, each designed to identify and nurture natural ability while eliminating the subjective biases that had plagued military training for generations. Video recording of all evaluations. Blind testing that concealed candidate identities. Mathematical scoring systems that couldn't be influenced by personal prejudices. Your graduation rate is 89%, Morrison observed, reviewing the statistics. The previous average was 23%. Because we're evaluating actual ability instead of cultural fit, Eliza explained. Most of the people who were failing out weren't lacking skill. They were lacking advocates, like you were. Exactly like I was. As they prepared to leave, Logan pulled Eliza aside for a private conversation. I want you to know something. That shot you made 6 months ago didn't just save my life. It saved the lives of every soldier who's been trained under these new protocols. Your willingness to take unauthorized action when it mattered has ripple effects we're still discovering. General, I was just doing my job. No, you were doing the job you should have been allowed to do 18 months earlier. There's a difference. Logan's expression grew serious. The commission to captain comes with command of the entire national program. Are you ready for that level of responsibility? Eliza looked out across the training ranges where dozens of future snipers were, honing skills that would keep their fellow soldiers alive in combat. She thought about Staff Sergeant Martinez, who was now working a desk job in Alabama after his prejudices cost him his career. She thought about Sergeant Reynolds at Blackwater, whose deliberate sabotage had finally caught up with him in the form of a court-martial and dishonorable discharge. She thought about Master Sergeant Carter, probably telling her story to another group of veterans, proud that his final student had proven that talent couldn't be buried by bureaucracy. Most of all, she thought about the 18 months she'd spent cleaning rifles for soldiers who couldn't make the shots she demonstrated every day if they'd bothered to notice. Yes, ma'am, I'm ready. Good. Because the country needs leaders who understand that our greatest weapon isn't technology. It's the human potential we've been wasting through ignorance and prejudice. As General Logan's vehicle disappeared down the access road, Eliza stood alone on the observation deck where she'd started the day. 6 months ago, she'd been a forgotten soldier at a remote outpost, dismissed by her peers and underutilized by her superiors. One shot had changed everything, not just for her, but for an entire institution that had finally been forced to confront its own failures. Thompson approached with the day's training reports. So, he said, Captain Shaw has a nice ring to it. I haven't accepted yet. You will, because you understand something that took me years to learn. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought against enemy snipers at 900 yards. Sometimes they're fought against the assumptions and prejudices that keep good people from doing the jobs they were born for. He was right, and they both knew it. The commission to captain would bring new challenges, political pressures, and the constant scrutiny that came with being a symbol of institutional change. But it would also bring the opportunity to ensure that no other qualified soldier would suffer the injustice she'd endured. As the sun set over the Georgia countryside, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Eliza Shaw allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The failed sniper candidate who'd spent 18 months cleaning rifles was about to become the officer responsible for training the next generation of America's most elite marksmen. The journey from Tactical Outpost 87 to Fort Benning had been painful, transformative, and ultimately vindication of everything Master Sergeant Carter had taught her about the difference between soldiers who could shoot and warriors who could change the world. Don't cry when you miss, kid, Martinez had sneered 18 months ago. She hadn't missed, and she never would again. The story that began with mockery and dismissal had ended with redemption and revolution. Sometimes that's exactly how justice is supposed to work, one perfect shot at a time. In the distance, the sound of rifle fire echoed across the training ranges, where tomorrow's heroes were learning that skill, dedication, and precision mattered more than anyone's narrow definition of who belonged in which job. It was the sound of change, delivered with the mathematical certainty that Eliza Shaw had always known would triumph over prejudice. The war against institutional injustice was far from over, but one decisive battle had been won by a woman who refused to accept other people's limitations as her own. And sometimes, one perfect shot is all it takes to change everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.